In the midst of a car crash's wreckage, something totally unexpected happened. A wild lynx approached the debris and found a baby still alive among the twisted metal. But what it did next, no one, absolutely no one, could have seen coming. The animal's reaction shocked even the most seasoned rescuers and made headlines worldwide. The cold dawn air bit through the mountains of northern Montana as Ethan Miller's sedan navigated the winding road that cut through the dense pine forest. The tires hummed against the damp asphalt, creating a rhythmic soundtrack to the journey. Behind the wheel, Ethan's eyes burned with exhaustion. Beside him, his wife Sarah slept, her head resting against the window, while their 3-month-old daughter Emma slumbered peacefully in her car seat. They were returning from a weekend visit to Sarah's parents in Kalispell, a 5-hour drive from their home in Helena. Ethan had insisted on leaving before sunrise, hoping to beat the incoming storm that weather reports had been warning about for days. "Just a few more hours," he whispered to himself, reaching for the thermos of coffee in the cup holder. As he took a sip, his phone buzzed on the dashboard. He glanced down for just a second, long enough to see his boss's name on the screen. A moment's distraction, a patch of black ice, and suddenly the car was no longer under his control. Time slowed to a terrifying crawl as the vehicle skidded across the slick road. Ethan desperately turned the wheel, trying to regain control, but momentum carried them toward the shoulder. The last thing he remembered was Sarah's scream as the car plunged down the embankment, flipping several times before coming to rest deep within the forest. Silence fell over the scene, broken only by the distant call of a bird and the ticking of the cooling engine. Inside the wreckage, little Emma began to cry softly, her wails barely audible through the crumpled metal and shattered glass. Half a mile away, a pair of alert eyes tracked the sound. A lynx, a solitary hunter with tufted ears and distinctive facial ruffs, paused in its morning patrol. The feline tilted its head, processing the unfamiliar noise. The scent of gasoline and rubber infiltrated its sensitive nostrils, but beneath that, something else called to it, something small and vulnerable. The lynx, a male, the local conservation. Officers had named Atlas, had roamed these forests for 6 years. Known for keeping his distance from human activity, he had been spotted only a handful of times by hikers and rangers. Something about the soft cries, piercing the morning stillness, compelled him to investigate rather than retreat. With silent, deliberate steps, Atlas padded toward the source of the disturbance. He circled the wreckage cautiously, eyes scanning for any movement. The metallic debris was foreign and threatening, but the cries continued to pull him closer. Slipping through a gap in the twisted frame, Atlas discovered Emma, still secured, in her car seat, which had somehow remained intact despite the violence of the crash. The baby's blanket had partially unwrapped, exposing her to the bitter cold. Her tiny fingers had turned pale, and her cries were growing weaker. In a motion that defied his wild nature, Atlas settled beside the infant. His thick fur provided a barrier against the morning chill, and his body heat slowly enveloped the child. Emma's cries subsided as warmth returned to her small frame. The lynx remained perfectly still, occasionally turning to lick the blanket, pulling it closer around the baby with gentle pulls of his teeth. Hours passed, and the forest began to stir with daytime activity. A heavy logging truck rumbled along the road above, followed by another. The drivers, Jake Thompson and Mac Wilkins, veterans of the mountain roads, noticed something unusual, a flash of twisted metal visible through the trees below. "Hold up," Jake called to his partner as he pulled over. "Something's down there." The two men made their way down the steep embankment, expecting to find an abandoned wreck. What they discovered instead left them speechless. The crashed car was recent, still bearing the marks of a violent accident, and beside it, visible through a gap in the mangled frame, was a lynx guarding what appeared to be a bundle of fabric. "Is that a baby?" Mac whispered, his voice tight with disbelief. When Jake took a cautious step forward, Atlas issued a low, rumbling growl, not aggressive, but clearly communicating a boundary. The message was unmistakable. Approach with care. Call for help, Jake instructed, his eyes never leaving the scene before them. And don't make any sudden moves. While Mac radioed for emergency services, Jake maintained his distance, watching in awe as the Lynx remained at its post, vigilant and protective. The unlikely guardian occasionally glanced toward the men, but focused primarily on the infant, adjusting its position when Emma stirred. 30 minutes later, the narrow forest road filled with flashing lights as rescue vehicles arrived. Paramedics, state troopers, and wildlife officers converged on the scene, creating an impromptu command center. At the roadside, "I've never seen anything like this in 20 years of service," admitted Wildlife Officer Diana Reynolds as she assessed the situation. That lynx should have bolted the moment it sensed humans approaching. The rescue team faced an unprecedented challenge: how to extract an infant from a crash site being guarded by a wild predator. Standard procedure would involve tranquilizing the animal, but concerns about startling it into aggressive action near the baby made that option risky. "Let me try something," Diana suggested. Retrieving a package of meat from her vehicle, bait she used for wildlife monitoring programs, she set it at a distance from the wreckage. Atlas noticed immediately, his nostrils flaring at the scent, but he remained unmoved. "He's not leaving." "Ooh, that child," Jake observed. "It's like he's appointed himself her protector." As the rescue team deliberated, a light snow began to fall, adding urgency to their efforts. Emma needed medical attention, and the temperature was dropping rapidly. Paramedic Ryan Cooper approached the wreckage slowly, medical kit in hand. "I'm going to try," he announced. "If that cat wanted to harm the baby, it would have happened hours ago." With all eyes fixed on him, Ryan inched toward the vehicle. Atlas watched intently, his posture alert but not threatening. When Ryan was just a few feet away, he began speaking in a low, soothing voice. "It's okay," he murmured. "We're here to help. We'll take care of her now." To everyone's amazement, as Ryan extended his hands toward Emma, Atlas shifted slightly backward, creating just enough space for the paramedic to reach in. It was as if the wild animal understood that the humans represented safety for his small charge. With careful movements, Ryan extracted Emma from her car seat. The moment the baby was secure in his arms, Atlas retreated a few paces, watching as the infant was carried up the embankment to the waiting ambulance. As the rescue team prepared to transport Emma to the nearest hospital in Missoula, Diana noticed something remarkable. Atlas had not disappeared into the forest as expected. Instead, the lynx had moved to a nearby ridge, observing the activity from a distance. "He's still watching," she noted. "I've never seen a wild predator show this kind of behavior." Emma was rushed to St. Patrick Hospital, where a team of specialists awaited. Initial examinations revealed she had suffered mild hypothermia, but was otherwise unharmed. A miracle, considering the severity of the crash and the hours spent in the freezing forest. News of the extraordinary rescue spread quickly through the small community. By evening, local television stations were reporting on the miracle in the mountains and the unlikely guardian who had kept a baby alive against all odds. In the hospital's neonatal intensive care unit, nurses noticed something peculiar about Emma's blanket. The soft fabric bore small puncture marks and pulls, evidence of the lynx's efforts to keep the infant covered and warm. More surprisingly, despite these manipulations, not a single scratch marked the baby's delicate skin. As Emma slept peacefully under the watchful eyes of medical professionals, hospital security reported an unusual sighting. A lynx, matching Atlas's description, had been spotted in the wooded area behind the hospital parking lot. He followed the ambulance, Diana theorized, when called to investigate. Somehow, he tracked them all the way here. Setting up a discreet observation point, Diana confirmed that Atlas was indeed patrolling the hospital perimeter, appearing most frequently during the quiet overnight hours. The behavior defied everything she knew about Lynx habits. There has to be some explanation, she told her colleagues. Wild animals don't form attachments like this, especially not to human infants. Yet the evidence before her contradicted all conventional wildlife wisdom. For reasons known only to itself, a solitary predator had chosen to become a guardian, forming a connection that transcended the natural order. As Emma recovered in the hospital, her story captured national attention. Wildlife experts, psychologists, and spiritual leaders all offered theories about the extraordinary bond between the child and the lynx. Some spoke of animal instinct, others of cosmic intervention. For Diana Reynolds, who had dedicated her career to understanding the wilderness and its inhabitants, the incident challenged everything she thought she knew. As she watched Atlas maintain his silent vigil outside the hospital night after night, she began to wonder if there was more to the connection between humans and animals than science had yet discovered. What no one yet realized was that the events of that cold Montana morning were merely the beginning of a story that would unfold over years, a story of an unusual connection that would touch not only Emma's life, but the lives of many others in ways no one could predict. Meanwhile, Atlas continued his watch, a silent guardian from the shadows, as if bound by a promise that only he understood. 5 years passed since the miraculous rescue in the Montana wilderness. In the quiet suburb of Missoula, Emma Miller celebrated her 5th birthday in the backyard of the modest home where she lived with her grandmother, Catherine Walsh. The yard was decorated with colorful balloons and streamers, and a small group of neighborhood children gathered around a cake shaped like a forest animal, a lynx. Emma had grown into a curious, thoughtful child with striking blue-green eyes that seemed to capture the essence of the mountains themselves. Though she had no memory of the accident that claimed her parents' lives, the story of her rescue had become part of her identity, told and retold by those around her until it took on an almost mythical quality. "Make a wish, sweetheart," Catherine encouraged as Emma leaned toward the flickering candles. The child closed her eyes tightly, her small face solemn with concentration. After a moment's deliberation, she blew out all 5 candles in a single breath, prompting applause from the gathered guests. Later, as twilight painted the sky in shades of lavender and gold, Emma sat on the porch steps, gazing toward the distant mountains visible on the horizon. Catherine settled beside her, wrapping a light blanket around the child's shoulders. "What did you wish for, little one?" she asked, smoothing Emma's chestnut hair. Emma shook her head. "Can't tell, or it won't come true," she replied solemnly. Then, after a thoughtful pause, she added, "Grandma, do you think Atlas still remembers me?" Catherine felt the familiar tug at her heart. The lynx had been a constant presence in Emma's imagination, a silent character in her drawings and stories. Wildlife officials had tracked Atlas for nearly 2 years after the accident before losing sight of him. Some believed he had migrated deeper into the wilderness. Others feared he had met a hunter's bullet or succumbed to natural causes. "I think special connections like that don't just disappear," Catherine answered carefully. "Whether he's out there or not, you'll always share something unique." Emma nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. "Sometimes I dream about him," she confided. "In my dreams, he talks to me. He says he's watching over me." Catherine had grown accustomed to her granddaughter's vivid imagination, but something in Emma's tone gave her pause. The child spoke with such conviction, as if describing a memory rather than a dream. "What does his voice sound like?" Catherine asked gently. Emma considered this. "Not like talking with words, more like feelings that I understand." She tapped her chest. "In here." Before Catherine could respond, Emma's attention shifted to something in the gathering darkness beyond their yard. "Look!" she exclaimed, pointing toward the tree line where their property met the wilderness. Catherine squinted but saw nothing unusual among the shadowed pines. "What is it, dear?" "Eyes," Emma whispered, "watching us." A chill ran down Catherine's spine, despite the mild evening air. She scanned the trees again, but detected no movement, no gleam of reflected light. Yet Emma remained transfixed, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. The next morning, Catherine discovered peculiar tracks in the soft earth at the edge of their property, distinctly feline, but larger than a house cat. She photographed them before they disappeared and sent the images to Diana Reynolds, the wildlife officer who had been present at Emma's rescue and who had maintained a casual friendship with the family over the years. Diana arrived that afternoon, examining the prints with professional interest. "Definitely lynx," she confirmed. "Adult male, judging by the size." "Atlas?" Catherine asked, voicing the question that hung between them. Diana's expression remained neutral, though her eyes betrayed her excitement. "I couldn't say for certain, but lynx are territorial creatures with relatively consistent ranges. It's possible." They watched as Emma played nearby, oblivious to their conversation. The child had arranged her stuffed animals in a semicircle and appeared to be telling them a story, gesturing animatedly. "She said she saw eyes watching from the trees last night," Catherine confided. "I thought it was just her imagination." Diana nodded thoughtfully. "Children often see things we miss. Their senses haven't been dulled by years of ignoring what doesn't fit into our understanding of the world." "What are you suggesting?" The wildlife officer shrugged. "I'm not suggesting anything, merely observing. But I will set up a trail camera, if you don't mind, for research purposes." 3 days later, Diana returned with remarkable footage. The night vision camera had captured a mature male lynx moving along the periphery of Catherine's property, pausing occasionally as if surveying the house. The distinctive pattern of spots and facial markings left little doubt. It was Atlas, the same animal that had guarded Emma 5 years earlier. "This defies everything we know about wildlife behavior," Diana muttered, replaying the footage. "He should have no memory connection to Emma, no reason to seek her out after all this time." "Yet here he is," Catherine said softly. They decided not to share the footage with Emma, fearing it might encourage her to seek out the wild animal. But that evening, as Catherine tucked her granddaughter into bed, Emma revealed that she already knew. "Atlas visited last night," she announced matter-of-factly. "He sat under my window for a long time." Catherine felt her heart rate quicken. Emma's bedroom was on the 2nd floor. "How do you know that, sweetheart? I saw him, and I felt him here." She tapped her chest again, in that peculiar gesture that had become habitual when she spoke of the lynx. "He was sad about something." Daddy, next morning, news spread through Missoula of a near tragedy averted. A vehicle had slid off Route 12 during the night, coming to rest precariously on the edge of a ravine. The driver, disoriented and trapped, might have remained undiscovered until morning, if not for a passing motorist who spotted something unusual. A lynx pacing agitatedly along the roadside. Curious about the animal's behavior, the motorist had stopped and subsequently discovered the endangered driver. When Diana shared this news with Catherine, both women fell silent, contemplating the implications. It was the 2nd time Atlas had seemingly alerted humans to a vehicle in distress. "This is beyond coincidence," Diana finally said. "There's something else happening here, something we don't understand." Over the following months, Atlas became a spectral presence in their lives, never directly approaching the house, but frequently detected on the trail camera. Emma spoke of him with increasing familiarity, sometimes stopping mid-play to stare into the distance, as if receiving a message only she could hear. Winter arrived, blanketing Missoula in snow and transforming the landscape into a crystalline, Wonderland. As Christmas approached, Catherine noticed Emma spending more time at her bedroom window, watching the forest with unusual intensity. "Is everything all right?" she asked one evening, finding her granddaughter pressed against the glass despite the late hour. "Atlas is worried," Emma replied without turning. "Something bad is coming." Catherine had learned not to dismiss her granddaughter's intuitions. "What kind of bad thing, Emma?" The child shook her head. "I don't know, but it's big and scary." She finally turned to face her grandmother, her expression troubled. "He wants us to be careful." 2 days later, a massive snowstorm paralyzed western Montana, bringing down power lines and blocking roads throughout the region. Missoula itself was spared the worst, but their house, located on the outskirts of town, lost electricity and heat. As temperatures inside the home plummeted, Catherine made a difficult decision. "We need to go to the emergency shelter in town," she told Emma, helping the child into her warmest clothes. "It's not safe to stay here without heat." Emma resisted, her small face creased with concern. "But what about Atlas? He's trying to tell us something important." "Atlas would want you to be safe and warm," Catherine assured her, though a part of her wondered if she was making the right choice. The roads were treacherous, but staying in the increasingly frigid house posed its own dangers. They had just loaded their emergency supplies into Catherine's SUV when Emma froze, her gaze fixed on the tree line. "Wait," she whispered, "he's here." Catherine followed her granddaughter's gaze and felt her breath catch. There, partially visible in the fading daylight, stood Atlas. The lynx's tawny coat stood out against the snow, his tufted ears alert, amber, eyes fixed on the humans with unmistakable intent. Emma broke away from her grandmother's grasp and took several steps toward the animal. Catherine called out in alarm, but the child stopped at a respectful distance, meeting the lynx's gaze. "He says we shouldn't go," Emma announced after a moment of silent communion. "The roads are dangerous. He says someone is coming to help us." Catherine hesitated, torn between rational fear for their well-being and the inexplicable trust she had developed in her granddaughter's connection with the wild creature. As she deliberated, the sound of an approaching vehicle reached them. A moment later, headlights pierced the gloom as a truck equipped with snow chains carefully navigated their driveway. To Catherine's astonishment, Diana Reynolds emerged from the vehicle, bundled against the cold. "Thank goodness you're both still here," she called out. "The main road's completely blocked by fallen trees. I came to bring you to my place. I have a generator and plenty of supplies." When Catherine turned back toward the tree line, Atlas had vanished, melting into the forest as silently as he had appeared. But Emma was smiling, her earlier distress completely gone. "See, Grandma?" she said simply. "He knew." As they settled into Diana's warm, well-lit home that evening, the wildlife officer shared news that added another layer to the unfolding mystery. "We've been tracking unusual lynx activity throughout the region," she explained. "Not just Atlas, but several others as well. They're behaving in ways we've never documented before." "What do you mean?" Catherine asked, glancing toward the living room where Emma had fallen asleep on the couch. Diana hesitated, as if weighing how much to reveal. "There have been multiple incidents, road accidents where lynx were spotted behaving abnormally just before or after. A hiker who got lost was found after following what he described as a lynx that seemed to want me to follow it. A small fire at a campsite was discovered because a lynx's unusual behavior attracted attention." "You're suggesting these are not isolated incidents," Catherine said slowly, "that something broader is happening." Diana nodded, her expression grave. "I think we're witnessing something science can't easily explain, and somehow Emma is at the center of it." Outside, the storm raged on, wind howling through the mountains like a primal voice seeking expression. And somewhere in that swirling white darkness, Atlas continued his mysterious vigil, a sentinel between worlds, guarding secrets that were only beginning to reveal themselves. By the time Emma turned 10, her connection with Atlas had become an accepted, if unexplained, part of life for those closest to her. Catherine had transformed their home into a sanctuary where human and wilderness coexisted in delicate balance. Their backyard now extended to a carefully maintained clearing where Atlas would occasionally appear, never approaching the house directly, but making his presence known. Diana Reynolds had expanded her research to document what she carefully termed unusual interspecies communication patterns. Though privately, she admitted to Catherine that science lacked the vocabulary to properly describe what they were witnessing. Emma's ability to sense Atlas's presence and somehow understand his intentions defied conventional explanation. "It's like they share a frequency no one else can access," Diana observed one spring afternoon as they watched Emma sitting cross-legged in the clearing, apparently deep in silent communication with the Lynx, who remained partially concealed in the underbrush 20 yards away. Dr. Marcus Fletcher, a child psychologist who had been working with Emma since she started school, had initially approached her case with professional skepticism. 5 years later, he found himself reconsidering the boundaries between empirical evidence and unexplained phenomena. "I've ruled out standard psychological explanations," he confided to Catherine and Diana during one of their monthly consultations. "There's no evidence of projection or fantasy formation typical of childhood trauma. Emma distinguishes clearly between imagination and what she experiences with Atlas. Whatever this connection is, it's real to her in a fundamentally different way than make-believe." Emma herself had grown accustomed to navigating between two worlds, the rational, structured environment of school and friends, and the intuitive, wordless bond she shared with Atlas. She had learned early which experiences to share and which to keep private, understanding instinctively that her connection with the Lynx existed beyond the boundaries of ordinary human comprehension. "Atlas isn't just an animal," she tried to explain to her grandmother one evening as they prepared dinner. "He's like a bridge. He helps me understand things I couldn't otherwise." "What kind of things, sweetheart?" Catherine asked, her hands pausing over the vegetables she was chopping. Emma considered this, her young face serious. "The way everything is connected, how the forest thinks and feels, how the mountains remember." Such pronouncements had become common, each one stretching the boundaries of Catherine's understanding a little further. She had learned to listen without judgment, recognizing that her granddaughter was attempting to translate experiences that existed beyond language. That night, Catherine woke to find Emma standing at her bedside, her expression troubled in the dim glow of the nightlight. "Atlas needs us," she said simply. "We have to go to the old accident site." Fully awake now, Catherine sat up. "Emma, it's the middle of the night. We can't just drive into the mountains." It's important, Grandma. Someone needs help." Catherine had learned to trust these moments of certainty in her granddaughter. Reaching for her phone, she called Diana, whose experience with wilderness navigation would be essential for any nighttime expedition. An hour later, the three of them were driving along the same winding mountain road where Emma's parents had met tragedy a decade earlier. Diana had insisted on taking her sturdy Forest Service vehicle, equipped with emergency supplies and communications equipment. "Any idea what we're looking for?" Diana asked, her eyes fixed on the road ahead, illuminated by high-beam headlights. Emma, buckled into the back seat, pointed toward an upcoming curve. "There, we need to stop there." Diana slowed the vehicle, pulling safely onto the widened shoulder. The spot looked unremarkable, just another stretch of the forest-lined highway that snaked through the mountains. "This isn't where my parents' accident happened," Emma said, anticipating the question. "But it's where Atlas wants us to be." They exited the vehicle, Diana taking the precaution of retrieving a high-powered flashlight and her service pistol. The night was cool but not uncomfortable, the forest alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures. "Which way?" Catherine asked softly. Emma pointed toward a barely visible game trail leading away from the road. "He's waiting for us there." They followed Emma along the narrow path, Diana leading with the flashlight, while Catherine stayed close to her granddaughter. The trail wound through dense undergrowth for several hundred yards before opening into a small clearing. There, as Emma had predicted, waited Atlas. The lynx acknowledged their arrival with a subtle movement of his head before turning and padding deeper into the forest. After a few steps, he paused, looking back expectantly. "He wants us to follow him," Emma translated unnecessarily. The lynx's intention was clear. Diana hesitated, her professional caution warring with the trust she had developed in this unusual partnership over the years. "How far, Emma? Do you have any sense of what we're heading toward?" The girl closed her eyes briefly, as if consulting an internal compass. "Not far, there's water, and someone in trouble." They continued through the forest, guided by the lynx, who moved at a deliberate pace that allowed them to follow without difficulty. The terrain began to slope downward, and soon they could hear the gurgling sound of a creek swollen with spring runoff. The beam of Diana's flashlight caught a glimpse of something unnatural among the trees ahead, reflective material that didn't belong in the wilderness. As they drew closer, the shape resolved into a tent, partially collapsed and situated perilously close to the rising creek. "Hello!" Diana called out, switching to her authoritative Forest Service voice. "This is Wildlife Officer Reynolds. Is anyone there?" A weak voice responded from inside the damaged shelter. "Help, please." Moving quickly now, they approached the tent. Diana unzipped the entrance to reveal a young man, perhaps in his early 20s, lying in a sleeping bag. His face was flushed with fever, and an angry red line tracked up his leg from a badly swollen ankle. "My name's Diana Reynolds with Montana Wildlife Services," she introduced herself, kneeling beside him. "What happened to you?" The young man struggled to focus. "Tyler Matthews," he managed. "Hiking, slipped and twisted my ankle 2 days ago. Then something bit or stung me. Getting worse." Diana examined the inflamed leg with professional efficiency. "This looks like a serious infection, possibly from a spider bite. How did you end up so far from the trail?" "Thought I could make it to the road," Tyler explained weakly. "Got disoriented. Set up camp when I couldn't go further. My phone died. No one knows where I am." While Diana administered emergency first aid from her kit, Catherine contacted emergency services using the satellite phone Diana had brought. Given their remote location, a helicopter evacuation would be necessary. Throughout the rescue operation, Atlas remained at the periphery of the scene, watchful but uninvolved. Only Emma seemed aware of his continued presence, occasionally glancing in his direction as if confirming something. As they waited for the rescue helicopter, Tyler drifted in and out of lucidity. During one coherent moment, he fixed his gaze on Emma. "How did you find me?" he asked. "I'm nowhere near any trails." Emma hesitated, looking to her grandmother for guidance on how much to reveal. "We had some help," Catherine answered diplomatically. Tyler's feverish gaze moved past them, widening slightly. "Is that a lynx? Am I hallucinating?" They turned to see Atlas sitting upright at the edge of the clearing, illuminated by moonlight that filtered through the canopy above. The wildcat made no move to approach, but remained in plain sight, his posture almost formal. "You're not hallucinating," Diana assured him. "That's Atlas. He's an unusual lynx we've been studying. He led us to you." Tyler stared at the animal for a long moment. "I remember now," he whispered. "Last night, when the fever was really bad, I thought I dreamed a lynx standing over me. It just watched me for a while, then disappeared. He shook his head weakly. I figured it was the fever making me see things. The distant thrum of helicopter rotors ended further conversation. As the sound grew louder, Atlas melted back into the forest, disappearing as silently as he had arrived. The rescue team worked efficiently, stabilizing Tyler before airlifting him to the regional medical center. Before they departed, Tyler grabbed Emma's hand. "Thank your Lynx for me," he said, his voice sincere despite his weakened state. "Somehow, I think he saved my life." As they drove back down the mountain in the pre-dawn light, Emma was uncharacteristically quiet, her young face thoughtful. "You okay, sweetheart?" Catherine asked, reaching back to touch her knee. Emma nodded. "Atlas is happy we helped Tyler, but he's also worried." "Worried about what?" The girl frowned slightly. "I'm not sure. It's something bigger, something changing in the forest." She looked out the window at the passing trees. "He's not the only one who feels it. All the animals do." Diana exchanged a glance with Catherine. "You mean other lynx?" she asked carefully. "All of them," Emma clarified. "Bears, wolves, deer, even the small creatures. They all feel it coming." "Feel what coming, Emma?" Catherine pressed gently. The child shrugged, the gesture emphasizing how, despite her unusual perceptions, she remained a 10-year-old, trying to articulate concepts beyond her vocabulary. "Change, danger, I don't know the right word. Atlas just shows me feelings and pictures." The incident with Tyler Matthews added another chapter to the growing collection of inexplicable events surrounding Emma and Atlas. When Tyler recovered, enough to be interviewed, his account matched theirs exactly. A lynx had indeed visited him during his feverish night alone in the wilderness. The story caught the attention of Dr. Elena Martinez, an ethologist from the University of Montana, specializing in predator behavior. After hearing Diana's account and reviewing her documentation, Dr. Martinez requested permission to observe Emma and Atlas. "What I'm seeing challenges fundamental assumptions about animal cognition and interspecies communication," she explained during her third visit to Catherine's property. They sat on the back porch, watching Emma reading a book in the clearing, while Atlas lounged in the dappled shadow of a pine tree some distance away. Animals, particularly predators like lynx, may possess forms of intelligence and social awareness that differ from ours but are no less complex, Dr. Martinez continued. "Emma seems to have accessed a channel of communication most humans have lost or never developed." "But why Emma?" Catherine wondered aloud. "Why my granddaughter specifically?" Dr. Martinez considered this. Trauma can sometimes open perceptual doorways. The circumstances of her rescue, ours alone with Atlas at such a formative age, may have created a unique imprint. But there's something more here, something we're still missing. That something more revealed itself the following month, when a research assistant working with Dr. Martinez made a remarkable discovery in the archives of the Flathead Reservation's Cultural Heritage Center. Among the preserved oral histories of the Salish people indigenous to the region, she found multiple accounts of children developing special relationships with wild creatures following traumatic events. According to these stories, such children were considered blessed by nature, given the ability to understand the secret language of animals. They often grew up to become healers or spiritual leaders, serving as intermediaries between the human and natural worlds. Dr. Martinez shared these findings during a private meeting with Catherine, Diana, and Dr. Fletcher. "These accounts span hundreds of years," she explained, spreading photocopied transcripts across Catherine's dining table. "While we must be careful about imposing cultural interpretations, the parallels are striking." The revelation added yet another layer to the unfolding mystery. Was Emma's connection with Atlas part of a phenomenon recognized by indigenous cultures long before modern science had vocabulary for it? Were there Others like her throughout history, children who had somehow bridged the divide between human and wild. As summer gave way to fall, these questions remained unanswered. But the bond between Emma and Atlas continued to develop in unexpected ways. The Lynx's territory now seemed centered on the periphery of their property, his appearances so regular they had become almost routine. More striking were the changes in Emma herself. The shy, introspective child was blossoming into a confident, deeply intuitive young person with an uncanny awareness of the natural world. She could predict weather changes hours before they appeared on forecasts, sense the movements of wildlife throughout their property, and increasingly articulate aspects of her connection with Atlas that had previously defied explanation. "It's like a language made of feelings," she told Dr. Fletcher during one of their sessions. "At first, it was just impressions, danger, safety, hunger. Now it's more complex. I can see through his eyes sometimes, feel what he feels." She paused, considering, "And I think he can see through mine too." This development concerned Catherine more than she admitted. The blurring of boundaries between her granddaughter and the wild creature sometimes kept her awake at night, wondering where this unusual relationship was leading and what it might ultimately cost Emma in terms of normal human connection. Her concerns deepened when Emma began speaking of dreams in which she roamed the forest on 4 feet, experiencing the wilderness through Atlas's senses. The line between human child and wild lynx seemed increasingly permeable, at least in Emma's inner world. "I understand your worry," Dr. Fletcher told Catherine during a private conversation, "but I see no signs of dissociation or unhealthy escape. Rather, Emma seems to be integrating these experiences into a remarkably balanced psyche. She maintains healthy friendships, excels academically, and shows appropriate emotional development for her age." Catherine found some comfort in his professional assessment, but questions lingered. What would become of this extraordinary child with her extraordinary gift? And what role was Atlas truly playing in her life's unfolding story? The answer began to take shape on a crisp October morning when Emma came downstairs for breakfast with an unusual request. "I need to go back to where it all began," she announced. "Atlas is showing me something important, something about why he found me that day." Catherine looked up from her coffee, studying her granddaughter's determined expression. "You mean the accident site? We've been there before, Emma." The girl shook her head. "Not to visit, to understand. Atlas says it's time." Time for what? Catherine wondered, but she recognized the certainty in Emma's voice. Whatever revelation awaited them in the mountains, it seemed the moment had come to face it. The autumn forest blazed with color as Catherine's SUV wound up the mountain road toward the site where Emma's life had changed forever a decade earlier. Diana rode shotgun, while Emma sat quietly in the back seat, her gaze fixed on the passing landscape. Dr. Martinez had joined them as well, her scientific curiosity piqued by Emma's certainty that today would bring answers. "There," Emma said suddenly, pointing to a small turnout marked by a simple wooden cross, the memorial Catherine had placed years ago to honor her daughter and son-in-law. As they parked and exited the vehicle, the forest enveloped them in its ancient silence. The spot looked peaceful now, showing no trace of the tragedy that had occurred. Nature had reclaimed the land, covering old scars with new growth. "Atlas is waiting," Emma announced, setting off down a barely visible path that led away from the road. The adults exchanged glances before following, Diana taking the precaution of marking their trail with biodegradable surveyor's tape. They hiked for nearly 20 minutes, moving deeper into the forest than they had ventured on previous visits to the memorial. Emma navigated with confidence, never hesitating at forks in the trail or pausing to get her bearings. "She knows exactly where she's going," Dr. Martinez whispered to Diana. "It's as if she's following a map only she can see." Finally, They emerged into a sunlit clearing ringed by towering pines. At its center stood a massive lightning-scarred oak, unusual for the region and conspicuous among the surrounding conifers. Beneath the oak's sprawling branches waited Atlas, his tawny coat gleaming in the dappled light. But he wasn't alone. To the astonishment of the adults, 3 other lynx sat nearby, 2 full-grown and 1 adolescent, forming a loose semicircle around the base of the ancient tree. Atlas's family, Emma explained, her voice hushed with reverence. His mate and their offspring from the past 2 seasons. Dr. Martinez instinctively reached for her camera before stopping herself, recognizing the extraordinary privilege of the moment. "This defies everything we know about lynx social behavior," she murmured. "They're solitary creatures, except during mating season." Emma moved forward slowly, approaching the assembled wildcats without fear. Atlas rose to meet her, and for a moment girl and lynx stood face to face, separated by mere feet, a tableau that bridged worlds. "He wants to show me something," Emma said over her shoulder. "All of you should stay here." Catherine stepped forward anxiously. "Emma, it's okay, Grandma," the child assured her with a smile that seemed older than her years. "This is why we came. I need to see what he's been trying to tell me." With remarkable composure, Emma followed Atlas toward the ancient oak. The other lynx parted to create a path, their amber eyes tracking the human child with intelligent curiosity, rather than predatory interest. At the base of the tree, Atlas paused, pausing at a specific spot where the massive roots broke the surface of the forest floor. Emma knelt beside him, brushing away layers of accumulated leaves and pine needles. The adults watched from a distance, holding their breath, as the girl's exploration revealed a small hollow between 2 gnarled roots. From this natural hiding place, Emma withdrew something that glinted in the sunlight, a metal object, tarnished by years of exposure, but still recognizable as a woman's locket. "Mom's necklace," Emma breathed, rising to her feet with the treasure cradled in her palm. She turned toward Catherine, whose hands had flown to her mouth in recognition. "Sarah's pendant," Catherine confirmed, her voice thick with emotion. "The one your father gave her when you were born. We never found it after the accident. We assumed it was lost in the crash." Emma opened the tarnished heart, revealing 2 tiny photos still preserved inside, her parents smiling in happier times. "Atlas brought it here," she said with quiet certainty. "After the accident, before the rescuers came. He found it in the wreckage and carried it to safety, just like he protected me." The revelation hung in the air, a missing piece of a puzzle that had spanned a decade. But Emma wasn't finished. Turning back to the hollow, she reached in again, this time retrieving something unexpected, a small, smooth stone, unremarkable, except for a natural pattern that resembled a paw print. "This was already here," Emma explained, holding up the stone. "It's been here for generations. It's why Atlas came to our car that night. He was following a path that had been set long before any of us were born." Dr. Martinez approached slowly, her scientific skepticism wrestling with the undeniable evidence before her. "What do you mean, Emma?" The girl closed her eyes, as if listening to words only she could hear. When she spoke again, her voice carried a depth beyond her years. "This place is sacred to the animals of the forest. The Salish people knew it once. They called it the meeting place between worlds. It's where the boundary between human understanding and wild knowing is thinnest." She gestured to the ancient oak. "This tree has stood here for over 500 years, witnessing the passage of both animals and humans, sometimes bringing them together when the need is greatest." She held up the stone. "This is a marker left by the Salish medicine people generations ago. It calls to certain animals, those with the ability to bridge the worlds." Her gaze turned to Atlas. "Like him." Catherine stepped forward, gently taking the locket from her granddaughter's hand. "Are you saying Atlas was chosen somehow? That he was meant to find you that night?" Emma nodded. "He was already near our car before the accident happened. He felt the pull of this place, and when he found me, he recognized something in me, a capacity to understand his world. That's why he stayed, why he protected me." Dr. Martinez circled the ancient oak, her trained eye noting details the others might miss. "This tree should not be here," she observed. "It's not native to this elevation or region. And look." She pointed to weathered carvings barely visible in the bark, symbols whose meaning had been lost to time. Human markings, very old. Diana joined her, running her fingers over the ancient etchings. "I've seen similar symbols in the tribal archives. They mark places of power, where the natural and spiritual worlds intersect." As they spoke, Atlas approached Emma again, nudging her hand with his head, a gesture of startling domesticity from a wild predator. The girl scratched between his ears with natural familiarity, eliciting what sounded remarkably like a purr. "He's telling me the circle is complete now," she said. "I've seen what I needed to see. I understand why we're connected." A rustling at the edge of the clearing drew their attention. A family of hikers, a father, mother, and young son around 5 years old, had stumbled upon the extraordinary scene. They froze at the sight of the assembled Lynx, the father instinctively pushing his child behind him protectively. "Don't move," he called out, misreading the situation. "We'll go back and get help." "It's okay," Emma called back, her voice calm and reassuring. "They won't hurt you. They're just surprised by the interruption." As if to confirm her words, Atlas and his family retreated a few paces, creating more distance between themselves and the newcomers. Their body language remained relaxed, showing none of the tension that would precede an attack. The young boy peered around his father's legs, his eyes wide with wonder rather than fear. "Dad, look! They're like big kitties." "These are Canada Lynx," Emma explained, adopting the educational tone she'd heard Diana use during wildlife presentations. "They're wild animals that need to be respected, but they're not dangerous if you give them space." The father relaxed slightly, though confusion remained evident on his face. "I've never seen anything like this. How are you so close to them?" Emma exchanged a glance with her grandmother, who gave a small nod of permission. "My name is Emma Miller," she began. 10 years ago, when I was a baby, my parents' car crashed in these mountains. This Lynx," she gestured to Atlas, "found me and kept me warm until rescuers came. We've had a special connection ever since." Recognition dawned on the mother's face. "I remember that story. It was all over the news. The miracle baby saved by a wild lynx. That was you." Emma nodded, suddenly self-conscious under the family's amazed stares. The young boy slipped free of his father's protective grasp and took a step forward, his gaze fixed on Atlas. "Can I pet him?" he asked innocently. "No, honey," his mother said quickly. "They're wild animals, not pets." But something in the boy's earnest expression had caught Emma's attention. She studied him with the same intensity Atlas often displayed. When observing something of interest, "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Michael," the boy answered. Emma knelt to his eye level. "Do you like animals, Michael?" He nodded enthusiastically. "I talk to the birds in our backyard. Mum says it's just my imagination, but they talk back to me sometimes." A look passed between Emma and Atlas, a silent communication that had become second nature to them over the years. After a moment, she turned back to the boy. "I believe you," she said simply. "Some people can hear things others can't." The moment was interrupted by a rumble of distant thunder. The autumn sky, clear just minutes before, had darkened with approaching storm clouds. "We should head back," Diana advised, glancing at the threatening sky. "Mountain storms can move in quickly this time of year." As they prepared to depart, Emma noticed Atlas and his family had already melted back into the forest, a reminder that despite their extraordinary connection, he remained a creature of the wild with instincts honed by generations of wilderness survival. The two groups hiked back to the road together, reaching their vehicles just as the first heavy raindrops began to fall. Before parting ways, Emma approached young Michael once more. "Remember what I said," she told him, pressing something into his small hand. "Sometimes the world speaks to us in ways others don't understand. That doesn't make it any less real." When she returned to her grandmother's SUV, Catherine gave her a questioning look. "What did you give him?" Emma smiled. "The stone from the oak tree. Atlas showed me it's time for it to find a new keeper." The significance of this gesture wouldn't become clear until years later, when Michael Henderson would make headlines as a teenage wildlife researcher whose unprecedented insights into animal communication were revolutionizing conservation efforts across North America. By then, Emma Miller had established the Atlas Foundation, a pioneering research center dedicated to interspecies communication and ecological harmony. The organization's headquarters, situated on the land where Catherine's house once stood, which Emma had expanded into a wildlife sanctuary, had become a global hub for scientists, indigenous knowledge keepers, and specially gifted individuals who shared Emma's unique perceptual abilities. Atlas himself had lived far longer than the typical lifespan for his species, reaching the remarkable age of 22 before finally passing peacefully one winter night with Emma by his side. Yet his legacy continued through his descendants, several of whom demonstrated the same unusual affinity for human interaction that had distinguished their patriarch. On the 10th anniversary of the Atlas Foundation's creation, Emma, now Dr. Emma Miller, with degrees in both wildlife biology and comparative psychology, stood before a gathered crowd of supporters and fellow researchers. At 30 years old, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had found her purpose early and pursued it without wavering. What began as a personal connection between a child and a wild creature has blossomed into something far greater than any of us could have imagined, she told the assembled guests. The boundary between human and animal, between civilization and wilderness, is not the impermeable barrier we once believed. It is a permeable membrane, and with patience, respect, and openness, we can learn to communicate across that divide. She gestured to the sanctuary around them, where several lynx could be glimpsed observing the proceedings from comfortable distances. "Atlas showed me a path between worlds," she continued. "Now it's our responsibility to keep that path open, not just for the extraordinary connections like the one we shared, but for the everyday miracle of coexistence between species that share this planet." As she spoke, a young lynx, a direct descendant of Atlas, bearing the same distinctive facial markings, emerged from the undergrowth and sat in plain view of the gathering. Beside the wildcat walked a 7-year-old girl with solemn eyes and an air of quiet certainty that reminded many of Emma at that age. The child, a survivor of another wilderness tragedy, who had found her way to the Atlas Foundation through circumstances that echoed Emma's own story, approached the lynx without fear, reaching out to stroke its fur with natural familiarity. Catherine, now in her 70s but still sharp-eyed and vital, watched from the edge of the crowd, tears glistening in her eyes as the cycle began anew. Diana Reynolds, retired from the Wildlife Service but serving as the Foundation's senior advisor, stood beside her old friend. "Did you ever imagine that morning when you got the call about a lynx guarding a baby, where it would all lead?" Catherine asked softly. Diana shook her head. "Never. But that's the beauty of it, isn't it? Some connections are too profound for us to predict or even fully understand. All we can do is honor them when they appear and follow where they lead." As twilight descended over the sanctuary, Emma found herself alone at the edge of the forest, in the spot where Atlas had most often appeared during their years together. Though he was gone from the physical world, she still felt his presence in moments of stillness, a warm certainty that the bond they had formed transcended the limitations of life and time. "Thank you," she whispered to the gathering darkness, her words carried away by the gentle Montana breeze. "For finding me, for showing me the way." And somewhere in the whisper of wind through pine needles, in the rustle of leaves and the distant call of a night bird, she felt his answer. A reminder that some connections, once formed, become part of the eternal conversation between all living things. Dear listeners, we hope Emma and Atlas's extraordinary journey has touched your heart as deeply as it has ours. The connection between a child and a wild creature reminds us that the natural world still holds mysteries beyond our understanding. Mysteries that can transform lives when we remain open to them. If this story of unlikely guardianship and lifelong bonds moved you, please subscribe to our channel for more soul-stirring narratives that explore the hidden connections in our world. Hit the like button to help others discover this tale, and share your own stories of remarkable animal encounters in the comments below. Remember, a new emotional journey awaits you tomorrow. Don't miss it. Your support allows us to continue bringing these powerful stories to life.